Hi, I'm Shireen Faruti and I'm a Senior Manager at TNTP. Welcome to Session 2 of the STEM.LD orientation sessions for STEM-related CTE teachers and instructional leaders. As you may know, Niswonger's STEM.LD program is designed to grow STEM careers and opportunities for the children of Eastern Tennessee. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to remind you that we'll be watching videos from classrooms, so having audio set up is important. Given that this is asynchronous, and I can't possibly know if you're watching this individually or in a shared space with colleagues, I also want to share a note about timing. We anticipate this session will take between 45 minutes to an hour, depending on how much you choose to dig through all the resources and how long you take with applying the learning to a future unit. If you're here, it means that you've already completed Session 1 with TNTP, and you are either a CTE teacher or a CTE instructional leader. CTE teachers of STEM-related CTE courses need to participate in this series. If you aren't sure if your course is STEM related, please connect with your STEM.LD site lead or Niswonger. The intended audience in terms of instructional leaders is any instructional leader who supports, coaches, or develops CTE teachers on their campus. Now that we are all in the right place for the right session, let's take a quick look at what to expect. All of these sessions will be asynchronous, and there will be opportunities for you to engage with the content. Throughout all the trainings, you will see one or multiple of 3 symbols on this screen to signal engagement opportunities throughout the sessions. When you see this symbol, have the STEM.LD resource folder open on your computer. You also, if you are someone who prefers paper, you might want to have those materials printed in advance of the training. When you see this symbol, the light bulb, you will pause the video for reflection or for reading the materials. And finally, when you see this symbol, you will pause the video for practice. At the very end of each session, there will be a short survey that will capture your attendance at this session. You will find a bit.ly and a QR code that will lead you to a Google folder with the handouts for this session. You can access them by typing the web address that you see on the screen into your browser, or by using the camera on your phone to scan the QR code. Once you do that, you will find all the resources that we will use today during our training. Go ahead and open them now. In this session, we will dig into 2 of the 4 resources we identified in TNTP's The Opportunity Myth and connect them to Tennessee's vision for excellent CTE instruction. By the end of this session, you will have become familiar with all the components of the vision for excellent CTE instruction, with a special emphasis on focused and rigorous instruction. You will also use the companion resource called the Coaching and Observation Tool to observe a CTE classroom from Tennessee and evaluate the impact of a rigorous task on the instruction and student learning. Finally, you'll have the opportunity to increase the rigor of a task coming up in a future unit or lesson in your own classroom by using a few guided questions. As you might remember from our first session, we hypothesized and found that 4 key resources influence the outcomes that students achieve in the school year. During this series, we are going to focus on 2 of them: strong instruction, which is the type of instruction that asks students to do the majority of the thinking, and deep engagement, which involved students sharing that they found what they were working on in class interesting, enjoyable, and they were concentrating deeply on it. You may be saying to yourself, sure, that was a national report that covered thousands of classrooms all across the country, but what about Tennessee and what about our CTE classrooms? Well, I'm glad you asked. TNTP's work with Tennessee, specifically in CTE classrooms, began several years ago, where TNTPers were supporting state-level leaders in designing a vision for excellent CTE instruction. Here you see a high-level overview of the different components of excellent CTE instruction. The post-secondary and career readiness components are a mix of programmatic offerings and integrating the programming and instruction with literacy and general education requirements. These components are equally important in this vision, but they are just outside the scope of this particular orientation series. On the left-hand side, we see that the intentionally designed programs of study are ones that are focused, rigorous, and relevant. And on the next slide, we'll take some time to read the vision for excellent CTE instruction in its entirety and reflect on some of our own practices that already align to it. Where CTE courses are focused, we see students engaged with the industry standard technology, processes, and ways of approaching real-world problems. The problems themselves might be the foundation for rigorous tasks. We see this in the use of hypothetical scenarios and case studies that provide the at-bats in realistic scenarios to demonstrate and often allow students to apply their learnings. In a few minutes, we'll see an example of a task that asks students to model the teeth, the human teeth, from a human mouth. And though this isn't necessarily a real-world problem, it offers the students the opportunity to process knowledge that they're acquiring in class. Several of the student and teacher look-fors are evident in that video that I'll be sharing shortly. Where CTE courses are rigorous is when the students develop a deep understanding of the industry-specific vocabulary, content, and skills. This happens as a direct result of their educators' deep content-level knowledge and industry experience. That's you. You are the ones who offer this expertise through the mini lessons or direct instruction component of the lesson. And you embed that expertise in the task or assignment that you design for students. The students themselves, however, must use their critical thinking and problem-solving skills daily. The thinking and doing happens by the student. We'll spend most of the remainder of this session focused on rigorous instruction. Finally, where CTE courses are relevant is in how they align to labor market information and current industry standards. This is largely predetermined by the state of Tennessee, by industry and advisory councils, and by campus-level offerings. And though this is an important part and it's foundational to excellent CTE instruction, it's also a little outside the scope of these sessions. Now, as you see, we have this icon, which asks you to open up the materials and find the document titled The Vision for Excellent CTE Instruction. Then take some time to pause this video and read through the first 2 pages of that document. When you have completed that, please take a few minutes to reflect on what practices are already strengths of your campus or your classroom today, and which one or ones are areas of opportunity. Now let's preview pages 3 and 4 of the Vision for Excellent CTE Instruction before we dive into truly using it. When you look at this pages 3 and 4, what you see before you are just a sample list of ready student actions and ready teacher actions that reflect the different components of excellent CTE instruction. These actions reflect both the right side of the graph from before and the left side, where it was focused on intentional programs of study. So you'll see information here about the programmatic aspects, the EPSOs and CTSOs on or within your campus. And you'll see specific information and specific actions that would serve as evidence for excellent, focused, rigorous, and relevant instruction. Now, please pause the video to read pages 3 and 4 in their entirety and be thinking to yourself, first, where, when, and with what frequency are these particular actions already present in your classrooms? And what are some of the teacher or student actions that you believe to be missing from this list, but present in your classroom? Remember, this is a sample list of actions, not an exhaustive list, and there's no way that it could be. But it's worth taking the time while you're reading through this to think of actions that are missing either from the student side or the teacher side. Before you return, please make sure that you highlight 2 to 3 actions in each column or actions that you've added that need to be in place to ensure students are engaged in a focused, rigorous, and relevant task. This will likely take you several minutes, so please take your time to dig through this in depth. So if you were to see my paper that highlighted the 2 to 3 necessary teacher actions to ensure that students engage in a task, these are the 3 that I would have selected. And these are going to reappear a little later when we observe a classroom. And though the student actions and looking to see how the students are engaged in a task are incredibly important, we can only be responsible for what we can do. And in designing complex projects using industry-specific skills and developing learning experiences that allow for exploration of content, we are able to offer rigorous tasks to students. The final one that I've highlighted is the actual instruction in advance of or during the task, and using those multiple methods to present the material and model thinking processes that demonstrate what the task expects students to do. So designing the task, developing it, and actually teaching the content are the three that jumped out to me as necessary to ensure students engage in a rigorous task. The other document that is in your materials for today is called the CTE Coaching and Observation Tool. Please take a moment and pull it up either on your phone or on your computer. What I want to emphasize here is that this is not a rubric and it is not a checklist, even though it has those little check boxes. And it is not at all evaluative in nature, though it does align to the team rubric. This should be used as and is a sorted sample list of both student and teacher actions. And the arrow is pointing to that space where you can see that the first page is for students. And this, you'll notice in your document that the second page are for teacher look-fors. So we are going to spend most of our time in these two columns under focused and rigorous look-fors. Please take a few minutes to read through at least these two columns on both the student tool and the teacher tool. And if you'd like to, feel free to preview the other look-fors in the other columns as well. We're going to use this to observe a lesson in a few minutes, so you'll want to be pretty fluent in identifying these different actions. The final page in the coaching and observation tool is the notes section. You'll see that, as I said earlier, there's no way to have an exhaustive list so that you can go through and check all of the things that you see. So we're offering this space as a note-taking, evidence collecting guide. And on the left-hand side, you will take note of any sort of teacher level evidence that you see of focused, rigorous, and relevant instruction. And the right-hand side is for the evidence that you see from students. All right, so now this is the opportunity to roll up our sleeves and actually use this coaching and observation tool. So we're going to watch how this particular teacher leverages a rigorous task in her classroom. And we don't see the written task as a handout, and I can't necessarily read all the components of it on the board to know precisely what it is. But we get really quick information that the students are expected to create a model of the teeth in a human mouth. So there is a ton of great stuff that happens in this very short clip. So here I wanted to offer a couple ways that you might be able to watch this, whether you watch it twice or watch it once, but with a finger on the pause button, to be able to both watch and take note of all the different evidence you see of focused and rigorous instruction. If you're watching this training in a group, you might want to have a quick conversation about how you want to watch or note take and then proceed. Once we have reviewed the evidence that we found of focused, rigorous instruction from this classroom using the coaching and observation tool, we'll debrief one big question. And that question is, what is the impact on student learning of a rigorous task such as this? If
I were going to do this project, I would start out and I would think through what I needed before I got started. So I would possibly do some research first and go, I mean, how many of y'all know how many teeth you have? Okay, that could be important, yeah. So if you're going to make a model, I might do my research first. So look in your book, look on your tablet, do your research first that you will need to create your model with, and then you may go back and get your supplies back at the back. So when we get ready to get supplies, let's just use our usual routine where we start table 1, table 2, table 3, 4, 5, and 6. So let's take 10 minutes for you guys to look through your books, and at 20 after Abby will start with the, you guys can go get some stuff.
Use this one. What's it meaning by like max right is 5, max left is 6, and it's like.
Okay, so do you see anything on that you might think that they got that max right or max? You see something similar to that. Okay, it says maxillary. So that's just an abbreviation. Exactly.
What's it meaning by like this is 5 and then max left is 6?
Okay. So, this is just talking about how this came into play, and it's a method for numbering the teeth. So it tells you right here the mouth is divided into 4 quadrants. The nose is divided into 4, and the same called back here. And then the numbers are assigned to each quadrant. So this is the maxillary quadrant. That's the maxillary left. Mandibular left, and so this is mandibular is your lower jaw. So it's divided into 4 quadrants. And this is your maxillary right is 5. Your code numbers are assigned. So maxillary right is 5.
That one says 1.
This is for the front of the teeth. That's what that's talking about. So there's 5 and 7, but we're going to do purple. So that's teaching you how to use that numbering system.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're making a model of this, and it's like the FDI, and we have to make the 2 cookies, so we're using the top cookie and the bottom cookie, right? Yeah, and the marshmallows, I don't know if we're gonna like mold them into teeth, and then place them, and we've got 32.
And we're going to use the icing for the gums.
And then yeah, I think we should just put it down the middle, and then on the plate, we're gonna label the maxillary right and the maxillary left, because yeah, and the main whatever right and left. We can write it down like an actual dental system. You have to know which side you're talking about.
The gums. In the.
Label like the number system on the toothpick.
Okay. And so this is your what? Okay, so is that the bottom?
Yeah, I guess
That's the bottom.
exactly.
You should, but you're gonna have, you know,
Label there.
then will it matter with your numbers? Absolutely.
It's based off
I expect you to think through a good process. So what would you do? Okay, like.
Get 2 more cookies.
Well, I think the rest of the class is like working through this and figuring out how to do it. So what might you think you would do?
Cut the marshmallows. I told you.
Okay, that is a good plan.
I said cut it.
You know where the scissors are? In the old school. Okay, now what?
This is gum. These are the gum.
Okay, but let me ask you something. You have to label your teeth.
Wait, how are
Okay, what does your standard say? Look on your board, see what the standard says.
labeled? Okay.
So can you label that?
No, I guess.
Okay, so what would you need to do to fix that?
Just cut them in half.
That might work. I'm gonna try that. Do you know where?
I know this one maybe.
There's somebody here.
That's fresh.
So, you've got quite a few to fit on there, so you have to problem solve and figure out how you're gonna do that. How are you gonna fit all those teeth on there?
So you would have to do all 29.
Well, it depends. Are you and your partner making a top and a bottom jaw?
Sure. Oh,
Okay.
sure, awesome.
So, if you're making, tell me where the bottom jaw. If you're the bottom jaw, where would the bottom jaw be?
Right there.
Perfect.
Okay.
Okay, Cecilia, tell me what you're doing.
I'm about to actually put like a teeth.
And what is that?
The tongue.
Okay, I like that.
Okay. I'm actually gonna like. Okay. How can we do like? Can we write on the marshmallow?
You can do anything you want to do. You are the creator. So what would you like to do? What would be a good thought for labeling your teeth?
One more. No. One more. And listen. How are we gonna? We have to put the numbers on there.
Well, talk through some options. So what would you do? What's one option? You said one thing you could do.
Because like this would be right on. This would
So you could actually write on the marshmallow. Your partner doesn't like that idea. And this is, so what's something else you could do?
Write it on the piece of paper.
Okay, you could write on a piece of paper. What's something else you could write on? How else could you label?
If we had toothpicks, we can like tape it on there and then like stick it in.
Yes, you could do that too.
Okay then.
Okay, so y'all are gonna have to decide. But you've got lots of options here. So talk through those and decide what you
So
want
that
to do.
tongue's too big because we have to.
Yeah, next. What's your next step? Tell me what your next plan is.
When I'm ready to get done.
Wait on Braden to get, okay, after Braden gets finished with his, what is your next step?
Put my
Okay, but what is your big thing that you need to do with this? Look at your standard. Okay,
Identify.
so how are you gonna do that? Okay. Okay,
Bowlers.
a Sharpie?
Is that edible?
Sharpie?
A Sharpie is not edible.
We have
I need
we have a lot of extra marshmallows, so I wouldn't worry about that. We worry about like, make your thing as best as you can, and then we've got lots of extra stuff.
Okay.
Well, you can, but you may knock this marshmallows off and put some clean ones on if you choose to. But, okay, so tell me, what are some other ways you could label?
All right, Miss Bell, is this pretty fresh right here? I mean, that's not
Pretty fresh? How do you feel about that?
I feel it's really fresh.
Okay, does it meet your requirements?
Yes, it does. There's a little back.
A little back and everything? Okay.
Okay, I think I need to switch these.
You are the creator. Beauty is in your eye. You have to.
Beauty is the eye of the beholder.
Exactly. Okay, so tell me, what options are you guys going to use to identify?
Okay, so the molars, I'm going to put 2 dots. And the other one, 1 dot.
Okay, so how are you going to know what those dots mean?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I think you can definitely do that.
Do you suggest me using an expo marker?
What do you think?
I don't.
How would an expo marker work on that small surface?
Oh, I'm going to use a shot.
Okay, that might be a good idea.
Look at his guns. What is it called?
I'm not the most creative.
Look at mine. I drew a line down the middle, so you know that there's 8 on each side.
I see that.
But it doesn't even look like a mouse. It's less mouse than a line.
It's a model. Okay,
Okay,
his guns are chunky.
Okay, so let's take a moment to compare notes in terms of our evidence using the coaching and observation tool. We see a lot of the student look-fors checked off underneath rigor. And it's worth noting that not all of these apply for each and every student, but we're observing this class holistically. And we also see a couple of the behaviors under focused for the student look-fors. Again, I did not use this tool on any of the other elements of a instructional, a strong CTE instructional model. For the teacher look-fors, I noted several under both focused and rigorous as well. I want to note that there were some things I couldn't know from just a video, and that might have been true for you as well. For instance, asking focused pre-planned questions. We don't know if they were pre-planned questions unless we saw a lesson plan or something to that effect. And though it did seem like her questions of the class were ones that were largely asked in the small groups and connected to the progress that the students were making on the project they were working on. And we're going to chat a little bit more about questioning in our next orientation session, so I'm making a quick plug for that here. The other thing I want to make sure that I note is that if behaviors aren't checked on here, it doesn't mean that they were necessarily absent. They just weren't evident in the classroom at this point in time from this particular perspective. So again, this tool is not a checklist, it's not exhaustive, and it's not a rubric. It's a companion resource to the Vision for Excellent CTE instruction, and it can be used as a discussion tool. Tasks in CTE classrooms sometimes have the Goldilocks and the Three Bears effect, in that they are sometimes too easy, or they require thinking and doing that isn't necessarily tied to the topic at hand, or they're too hard in that students are sort of thrown a really robust, difficult task without a whole lot of context or framing leading up to being asked to complete that. So when they're too easy or too hard, that is an opportunity to review and or revise the explicit and implicit knowledge, skills, and vocabulary that's being expected of the students. Ideally, this happens when you're designing the task, but sometimes that needs to take place as you are assigning the task or as students are working on it, and you're noticing that it is, falling at one end of the spectrum or the other. So given that, increasing the quality of tasks in CTE classrooms will notably increase rigor in instruction. This is a critical component of making sure that the students are the ones doing the thinking in the classroom, and that they are the ones who are actively practicing the skills that they'll need for either the next level of the CTE program of study or for the industry that they're going into upon graduation. So please take a moment and just reflect on those two ideas, and if you're with others in this space, take a moment to sort of discuss how revising or reviewing the explicit and implicit knowledge, skills, and vocabulary might help ensure that students are clear on the tasks and the expectations. As promised, we are going to chat about the one big question after watching that video, and that is, what is the impact on student learning of this task? So when determining what the impact on learning of a task is, I ask myself the following. First, what are the expectations of the task? And you'll notice here that they are industry specific in terms of the knowledge, skills, and vocabulary, but they are also industry agnostic, meaning that employability skills, critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills, those are not necessarily tied to any particular industry or program of study, but those are universally necessary knowledge, skills, and vocabulary in order to be successful doing the task. So first, it's reflecting and thinking, what are the expectations? And second is, what do students need to be able to think, do, and or discuss in order to meet those expectations? We saw a lot of examples of both of these in the observation that we just made. And when you connect these two ideas together, what you have is an opportunity to rethink who is doing the mental lift in the classroom. So please take a moment now and reflect on the observation and your notes, and identify a few more examples of each of the above to determine the impact of a rigorous task on student learning. So I'll quickly share that I noticed industry specific. I'll use vocabulary as the example. When the teacher was reviewing with the students at the very beginning, the labeling and how the numbering worked within the model or within the mouth, that was industry specific. When she was talking with the group of boys around, sort of what their approach is going to be, the probing nature of her questions in ensuring that they were doing the thinking and coming up with how they were going to create this model was industry agnostic. For the second question, what do they need to be able to think, do, and or discuss? One thing that just sort of really resonated with me was that she gave them sort of a number of materials, and then when she was speaking to the two students about labeling the teeth, they asked, can we use this? And she said, you can do this however you want. So that answer allowed for the students and empowered the students to think about the different tools at their disposal, to choose one and to discuss it so that they are able to land on the same thing for their project. My one sentence answer to what the impact is on student learning of a rigorous task is simply put, the cognitive lift shifts from the teacher to the students when the task is well designed, rigorous, and focused. So now that we've done the deep dive into that observation, we are going to pivot a bit to focus on how to design rigorous focused tasks for our own classrooms. And these are 3 questions that you would want to consider in advance and during the design process of the task. So first is, what critical thinking and problem solving skills are expected of students when they are assigned the task? And this can take many forms. We'll dig into this a little bit more deeply in a moment. But one other type of skill that's often referenced in CTE courses are employability skills. And certainly that applies here as well. These skills you'll see are important to plan for, because if you don't plan for having the students actually practice them, you run the risk of having the focus be on the product and not on the process. The second question to consider is how the students are applying industry-specific vocabulary, knowledge, and skills. This is where you are clearly the subject matter expert, and that it gives, when done well, it gives the students the opportunity to practice and have some at-bats with some of the more complex vocabulary or terms, the knowledge that they need, and hands-on skills. And finally, how is the student communicating clearly and precisely about the task? We know that kids need the ability to communicate clearly and precisely about what they have done, what they are doing, and what they would like to do in order to have the opportunities that they want in their future. So building in opportunities for that communication, whether it's verbal or in writing, in their small group or to the whole class, is an important part of designing a task. If there's a particular one of these three that you would like to really zoom in and focus on, you're welcome to skip to that part of this training as you see fit. If you're in a whole group, I encourage you to determine which one that you want to focus on and go ahead and watch the rest of the video, but choose that one where you will stop and pause the video and actually apply it to a future unit or lesson in your class. So that first question, what critical thinking and problem-solving skills are expected of students when they're assigned the task? We saw great examples of this within the observation. Students were asked to create a model of teeth in a mouth using the marshmallows and other available materials. And the teacher at the very beginning started with how she would do the research before starting the task. So if I were going to do this project, this is what I would do. Do you guys know how many teeth you have? So she did a great job of sharing one way of processing this task, and she named specifically what some of the questions were that students would need to consider. Students also worked collaboratively to accomplish this task. This is something that CTE classrooms do well. One possible pain point here is when there are too many or too few students working together on any given task, it can dilute the rigor of the task so much. So you just want to be mindful of thinking using collaboration as the sort of employability skill or problem solving skill too often or without intention. So at this point, if you would please pause the video and think of an upcoming project, assignment, unit, or lesson that you have, and jot down what critical thinking and problem solving skills are you expecting of students when they are assigned that task. Question 2 is how the students are applying these industry-specific vocabulary, knowledge, and skills within the task or as part of the task. So when we were watching the video, we saw that some of the students really, sort of wrestled with some of the specific vocabulary because it seemed to be a little difficult to sort of move their mouth around. And they were assigned to label parts of the model, and they were wrestling with the idea of how to label it, what tool or resource to use to do that. And finally, the teacher paraphrased the text at the very beginning of the excerpt that we watched with a small group. So these are different ways that this teacher ensured that students were using industry-specific vocab, knowledge, and skills. At this point, please pause and think about a future unit or task and what specific industry-specific vocab, knowledge, and skills do you expect them to either practice or master as a result of completing that task? And the third question is around communication and what opportunities students have to communicate clearly and precisely about the task. We saw in the video that students explained the assignment and where they were in the process. Students articulated how they changed their approach to the task, and the teacher probed for specificity when students explained or didn't explain what their plan was for the model. So there were a number of opportunities that students had to communicate during the task. We didn't see the time before this particular project was assigned or what happened afterwards in terms of any opportunities to communicate or do some sort of a gallery walk or offer feedback or whatever. But for what we saw, we did see several different examples of students communicating within their small group to one another and to the teacher. One opportunity that's available here is also considering who the audience is and how that communication takes place, whether it's in a formal written way, whether it is informally written, if it's oral, or any other sort of method of communicating about the task. So at this point, with that same future unit or task in mind, please take a moment and think of how are you offering opportunities for the student to communicate clearly and precisely about the task. And that's a wrap. So hopefully you have some tools in your toolkit to take a look at. Certainly the Vision for Excellent CTE instruction and the Coaching and Observation tool are two great resources. When you watch, at the end of each session, there will be an attendance survey. This survey is for both live participants and folks who are participating asynchronously. Each person, if you're watching this as a part of a group, needs to complete this survey, which you can do by either using your cell phone and scanning the QR code or by typing the bit.ly into your browser. Please take a minute to fill out the brief survey so we can capture your participation here. And once you've completed the survey, you will receive a confirmation email with the name and length of the session. Thanks so much for joining today.